The Solus Prime glided through the vast, silent expanse of space, its metallic hull shimmering faintly under the cold, distant glow of unfamiliar stars. It was a masterpiece of human ingenuity, a symbol of Earth's determination to reach beyond its cradle and claim its place among the stars. Yet, as it drifted further into the unknown, the weight of the void seemed to press down on the crew, a silent reminder of how far they were from home. Captain Elias Kane stood at the center of the bridge, hands clasped behind his back. His weathered face, lined with years of command and responsibility, betrayed no emotion, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the glowing panels and screens that surrounded him. He was a man of quiet strength, his presence steadying the nervous energy of the crew around him. "Status report, Voss," he said, his voice calm but firm. At her station, Navigator Aria Voss's fingers danced over her console, her youthful face illuminated by the soft, shifting light of the data streams. Her brow furrowed as she leaned closer to the screen, her breath catching slightly before she responded. "Captain," she began, her voice steady but tinged with unease, "we've exited the jump point, but something's wrong." Kane turned to her, his expression tightening ever so slightly. "Define wrong, Navigator." Voss hesitated, her fingers flying across the console as she pulled up the star charts. "The coordinates don't match, sir. We're nowhere near Proxima Centauri." In fact, she paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I don't think we're anywhere near the mapped sectors of known space." Kane's frown deepened as he strode toward her station, his boots clicking softly against the polished floor of the bridge. The glow of the console reflected in his eyes as he leaned over her shoulder, scanning the data. The readings were incomprehensible. Instead of the quiet, unremarkable star system they had expected, the sensors showed a region teeming with activity, massive energy signatures, sprawling artificial structures, and a dense network of ships moving with purpose. "This wasn't supposed to be here," Kane muttered, his voice low but carrying a weight that silenced the soft hum of conversation on the bridge. Voss glanced at him, her usually confident demeanor faltering. "Captain, these structures, they are enormous. The energy levels, they are off the charts. This isn't a natural formation." Kane straightened, his mind racing. The Solus Prime was equipped with the best technology humanity had to offer, a vessel designed to explore and survive the unknown. But nothing in their training or preparation had accounted for this. "Power down non-essential systems," he ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. "Let's stay quiet until we figure this out." The crew moved quickly, their movements rehearsed but tinged with a nervous urgency. The hum of the ship's engines softened as systems powered down, leaving only the faintest vibrations in the air. The Solus Prime floated silently now, a lone speck of human ingenuity in a galaxy that suddenly felt far too vast, far too alien. Kane returned to his command chair, his gaze fixed on the main display. The screen showed the vast expanse before them, dominated by the shadowy outlines of colossal structures. They were unlike anything humanity had ever imagined, towering constructs that seemed to pulse faintly with an eerie, rhythmic energy. Ships swarmed around them like insects, their movements precise and coordinated. "What are we looking at?" Kane murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Reyes, the comms specialist, spoke up from his station, his voice breaking the heavy silence. "Sir, I'm picking up faint transmissions. The language, it's nothing I've seen before. But it's structured, organized. This is definitely an advanced civilization." Kane's jaw tightened. For years, humanity had stared into the void, wondering if they were alone. Now, as the reality of what they were seeing sank in, that question had been answered. "Keep monitoring," Kane said, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. I want every detail, no matter how small. As the bridge fell into a tense silence, Kane leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving the display. The vastness of space stretched out before them, but for the first time, it didn't feel empty. It felt alive, teeming with unknown forces, unseen eyes, and untold dangers. And the Solus Prime, humanity's first step into the stars, had stumbled right into the heart of it. The Dominion Ascendant loomed like a predator in the endless void, its jagged silhouette cutting through the starlight. The dreadnought was a fortress of power, its dark hull bristling with weapons that could reduce entire worlds to ash. Within its labyrinthine corridors, the air was cold and heavy, a silence that carried the weight of countless conquests. This was the heart of the Zorathian Empire's might, a vessel that inspired both fear and awe across the galaxy. Admiral Kael'tharic stood at the center of the command chamber, his imposing figure framed by the towering windows that stretched above him. The stars outside seemed distant and faint, as if they, too, feared the presence of the Empire's enforcer. Tharic's crimson eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, their unblinking gaze fixed on the holographic display hovering before him. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone, but the faint twitch of his clawed fingers betrayed his restless energy. A junior officer approached cautiously, his footsteps echoing across the polished floor. He stopped a safe distance away, bowing his head slightly before speaking. "Admiral," he began, his voice tight with nerves, "sensors have detected an unidentified vessel in the Zarian fringe. It doesn't match any known registry." Tharic turned his head slowly, his eyes narrowing as he regarded the officer. The younger man swallowed hard under that piercing gaze, his hands clasped tightly behind his back to keep them from trembling. Tharic's presence was suffocating, a force of authority that seemed to drain the air from the room. "An unidentified vessel," Tharic repeated, his voice low and measured, like the rumble of distant thunder. He stepped closer, his heavy boots striking the floor with deliberate precision. "And what, precisely, do you believe this vessel to be?" The officer hesitated, his throat bobbing as he struggled to find the right words. It could be a smuggler, sir. Or perhaps a rogue trader operating outside sanctioned routes." Tharic's lips curled into a faint sneer, and he waved a clawed hand dismissively. "Another smuggler," he said, his tone laced with disdain. "Send a patrol to investigate. I have no time for trivialities." The officer nodded quickly and retreated, eager to escape the Admiral's scrutiny. Tharic turned back to the holographic display, his expression hardening. The vessel's faint signal flickered on the screen, a single speck of light in the vastness of the sector. It was insignificant, barely worth a second thought. And yet, as Tharic stared at it, a strange unease began to stir in the pit of his stomach. For over 3 millennia, the Zorathian Empire had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist. Its reach extended to the farthest corners of known space, its power unmatched by any rival. Tharic had spent decades enforcing the Emperor's will, crushing rebellions and eradicating threats with ruthless efficiency. He had seen countless ships, countless faces, all of them broken beneath the weight of the Empire's might. This vessel should have been no different, a minor annoyance, a fleeting distraction in the grand scheme of things. And yet, something about it gnawed at him. It wasn't the vessel itself, but the way it had appeared suddenly, without warning, in a region of space that should have been empty. The Zarian fringe was a desolate expanse, a borderland far from the Empire's core territories. It was a place of silence and shadows, where few dared to tread. For an unknown ship to appear there, so close to the Empire's dominion, was unusual. Tharic clenched his jaw, his claws tapping lightly against the edge of the console. He hated this feeling, this flicker of uncertainty that refused to be ignored. It was a weakness, a crack in the armor of his confidence. He had risen to his position by being decisive, unyielding, a force of nature that bent the galaxy to his will. Doubt had no place in his mind. And yet, it lingered. "Admiral," came a voice from behind him. It was Commander Drolk, one of his most trusted officers, his reptilian features sharp and severe. "Shall I prepare the fleet for a full sweep of the fringe?" The Rook shook his head, his gaze never leaving the display. "No," he said firmly. "A single patrol will suffice. If this vessel is what I suspect, it will not warrant further attention." Drolk hesitated, his yellow eyes narrowing slightly. "And if it is not?" The Rook's lips pressed into a thin line. He turned to face the commander, his crimson eyes burning with quiet intensity. "Then we will deal with it as we always have. Swiftly. Decisively." Drolk nodded, though his expression remained uncertain. He knew better than to question the Admiral's orders, but even he could sense the strange weight in the air, the unspoken tension that lingered between them. Something about this situation felt different. As Drolk departed to carry out his instructions, the Rook remained alone in the command chamber, the faint hum of the ship's systems the only sound. He stared out into the void, his reflection faintly visible in the glass. The stars seemed distant, their light cold and indifferent. For the first time in years, he felt the faintest flicker of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since his youth. Doubt. It was absurd, he told himself. The Empire was eternal, its power absolute. No single vessel, no matter how unusual, could threaten the stability they had built over millennia. And yet, as he turned back to the holographic display, that flickering signal seemed to mock him, a tiny ember of defiance in the vast, crushing darkness of the Empire's shadow. The Rook's claws curled into a fist, his jaw tightening. Whatever this vessel was, whoever commanded it, they would learn the folly of standing against the Zorathian Empire. And yet, deep in his gut, the unease remained, a silent whisper that refused to be silenced. The Solus Prime hung in the cold void of space, its metallic hull gleaming faintly under the distant light of alien stars. The bridge was tense, every crew member frozen in anticipation, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them like a physical force. The silence was broken by Nolan Reyes, his voice tight with urgency. "Captain," he said, his fingers dancing over the comms console, "I'm picking up transmissions. It's a language we've never encountered, but the patterns, they suggest advanced civilization." Captain Kane turned toward Reyes, his sharp gaze narrowing. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Advanced civilization. The very thing humanity had dreamed of discovering and feared to encounter. Before Kane could respond, Arya Voss's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Captain," she shouted, her hands gripping the edges of her console. "Incoming vessels. 3 ships on an intercept course." All eyes turned to the main display as it flickered to life, revealing the approaching ships. They were sleek and angular, their dark surfaces reflecting the faint light of the surrounding stars. Their design was utterly alien, their sharp edges and predatory shapes radiating menace. They moved with precision, their formation tight and deliberate, like hunters closing in on prey. Kane felt his stomach tighten, a cold knot of dread settling deep within him. These ships weren't explorers or traders. They were something else entirely, something dangerous. "Can we jump back?" Kane asked, his voice steady despite the rising tension. Chief Engineer Darius Huxley, standing at his station near the rear of the bridge, shook his head grimly. "Not for another 12 hours, Captain. The drive needs time to recharge after the last jump." Kane's jaw clenched. They were trapped, alone in an uncharted region of space, with no immediate way to escape. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. "Open a channel," he ordered. His voice carried the weight of command, cutting through the rising murmurs of the crew. "Let's try diplomacy?" Reyes nodded quickly, his hands moving to comply. The comms crackled to life, a burst of alien signals flooding the bridge. The sounds were incomprehensible, a cacophony of tones and rhythms that defied human understanding. But then, amidst the chaos, a single message emerged, clear and deliberate. The alien voice was cold and mechanical, devoid of emotion. The words were translated into English by the ship's systems, though their meaning was no less chilling: "Power down and prepare for boarding." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Kane exchanged a glance with Commander Selene Ward, who stood at his side. Her expression was calm but serious, her sharp blue eyes betraying a flicker of unease. "Send this," Kane said, his voice firm. "We are the Solus Prime from Earth. We come in peace but decline boarding. Let's meet at a neutral location." Reyes hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. The message was sent, but the reply was not what they had hoped for. The alien ships didn't respond with words. Instead, they moved, their formation shifting with deadly precision. The three vessels spread out, flanking the Solus Prime like wolves circling a cornered prey. Their engines flared, and they accelerated, closing the distance with alarming speed. "Evasive maneuvers!" Kane shouted, gripping the edge of his chair. The Solus Prime jolted as its thrusters roared to life, the ship banking hard to avoid the incoming vessels. The crew held on tightly as the ship moved with surprising agility, its advanced systems allowing it to twist and turn through the void. The alien ships followed, their sleek forms cutting through space like knives. On the lead alien vessel, Commander Drolk of the Imperial Patrol growled in frustration, his sharp teeth bared in a snarl. His reptilian features twisted with anger as he watched the human ship dart and weave, evading his squadron's attempts to pin it down. "How is that primitive vessel outmaneuvering us?" he hissed, his claws digging into the armrests of his command chair. The bridge of the alien ship was dark and oppressive, illuminated by the faint glow of crimson displays. The crew around Drolk worked with cold efficiency, their movements precise and calculated. But despite their best efforts, the human vessel continued to evade them, its movements unpredictable and erratic. "They are using short-burst thrusters," one of Drolk's officers growled, his voice low and guttural. "Their ship is lighter, more maneuverable. It's not standard Imperial design." Drolk's eyes narrowed, his gaze fixed on the glowing image of the Solus Prime on the main display. The ship was small, insignificant compared to the might of the Zorathian Empire. And yet, it was proving to be a greater challenge than he had anticipated. "Primitive or not," Drolk said, his voice cold and venomous, "they will not escape. Increase power to the forward disruptors. Prepare to disable their engines." Back on the Solus Prime, the tension on the bridge was palpable. The alien ships were relentless, their pursuit unyielding. Kane's mind raced as he weighed their options. They couldn't outrun the alien vessels forever, and a direct confrontation would be suicide. "Voss, plot a course toward the nearest asteroid field," Kane ordered. "If we can lose them in the debris, we might have a chance." "Yes, Captain," Voss replied, her hands moving quickly over her console. The Solus Prime veered sharply, heading toward a distant cluster of asteroids. The alien ships followed, their weapons charging as they closed the distance. Kane could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on him, the lives of his crew hanging in the balance. "Reyes," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "keep trying to communicate. We need to find a way to end this without bloodshed." Reyes nodded, though his expression was grim. "I'll do my best, Captain." As the Solus Prime plunged into the asteroid field, the alien ships hesitated for a moment before following. The chase was far from over, and the first contact between humanity and the Zorathian Empire was quickly spiraling into conflict. Kane's stomach churned with unease, but he pushed the feeling aside. There was no time for doubt. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain: humanity's place among the stars would be decided here, in the cold, unyielding darkness of the void. The command chamber aboard the Dominion Ascendant was a cavernous expanse of cold steel and shadow, its walls lined with glowing crimson displays that pulsed like the heartbeat of some ancient beast. Admiral Kael'tharic stood at the center, an imposing figure cloaked in rigid authority. His crimson eyes burned with fury as he listened to the trembling voice of Commander Drolk echo through the chamber. "You're telling me," Tharic began, his voice low and dangerous, "that this unknown ship not only outmaneuvered your patrol but escaped using untraceable jump technology?" Drolk's image flickered on the holographic display, the commander's reptilian features pale with fear. He struggled to maintain his composure under the weight of the Rix's glare, his sharp claws twitching nervously at his sides. "Yes, Admiral," Drolk replied, his voice barely steady. "Their movements were unpredictable. Their ship is unlike anything we've encountered before. And their jump drive, it left no residual trail. We couldn't track them." The silence that followed was suffocating. The Rix's expression darkened, his clawed fingers curling into fists at his sides. The air in the chamber seemed to grow heavier, charged with the weight of his barely contained rage. For a moment, no one dared to speak. Even the hum of the ship's systems seemed to fade into the background, as if the Dominion Ascendant itself held its breath. "Unacceptable," the Rix said finally, his voice a cold, venomous hiss. He stepped forward, his heavy boots striking the floor with deliberate force. "You allowed a single vessel, a primitive vessel, to humiliate the Empire's patrol? To evade us in our territory?" Drolk flinched, his eyes darting downward. "Admiral, they were resourceful. Their ship is highly maneuverable, and their tactics—" "Enough!" The Rix's voice thundered through the chamber, cutting Drolk off mid-sentence. The holographic display flickered slightly under the force of his outburst. "I do not want excuses, Commander. I want results." The Rix turned away from the display, his gaze shifting to the massive windows that framed the far wall of the chamber. Beyond the glass, the void stretched endlessly, a sea of stars cold and indifferent. Somewhere out there, the unknown ship was hiding an enigma that had dared to challenge the might of the Zorathian Empire. He could feel the unease gnawing at him, a dark whisper in the back of his mind. This wasn't just a matter of pride or protocol. The ship was different, its technology advanced in ways that defied explanation. It had appeared from nowhere, slipped through their grasp, and vanished without a trace. And that, more than anything, disturbed him. "Find them," the Rix said, his voice low but seething with intensity. He turned back to face Drolk, his crimson eyes burning with an almost predatory gleam. "Bring them to me. I want answers. I want to know who they are, where they came from, and how they acquired technology that rivals our own." Drolk nodded quickly, his movements stiff and mechanical. "Yes, Admiral. I will deploy additional patrols immediately. They won't escape us again." "They won't," the Rix agreed, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "Because if they do, Commander, it will be you who answers for their failure." Drolk's image flickered and disappeared, leaving the chamber in silence once more. The Rix stood motionless for a moment, his gaze fixed on the empty space where the hologram had been. His mind churned with thoughts, each one darker than the last. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for millennia, its power absolute, its dominance unchallenged. And yet, This single ship, a mere speck in the vastness of space, had shaken that foundation. It wasn't just the ship itself that troubled him. It was what it represented, the possibility that there were forces out there beyond the Empire's control, forces that could threaten the fragile order they had built. The Rook's claws tapped lightly against the edge of the console, a sharp, rhythmic sound that echoed through the chamber. His unease was growing, a shadow creeping at the edges of his thoughts. He hated the feeling, hated the uncertainty. He was an admiral of the Zorathian Empire, a force of will and power. Doubt had no place in his mind. And yet, it lingered. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered, his voice breaking the silence. His officers, who had been standing at attention along the edges of the chamber, snapped into action, their movements swift and precise. "If this ship is as dangerous as it seems," the Rook continued, his tone icy and deliberate, "we will not allow it to escape again. I want every patrol, every scout, every sensor array focused on finding them. No corner of this sector is to remain unsearched." He turned back to the windows, his piercing gaze sweeping across the stars. Somewhere out there, the unknown ship was hiding, its crew undoubtedly plotting their next move. The Rook's claws tightened against the console, his resolve hardening. "They think they can outmaneuver us," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "They think they can defy the Empire." A faint, humorless smile crossed his lips, cold and sharp as a blade. "They will learn," he said softly, the words carrying a quiet menace that sent a chill through the room. "No one escapes the Empire's shadow." As the officers moved to carry out his orders, the Rook remained where he was, his gaze fixed on the void. The stars seemed to shimmer faintly, their light distant and unfeeling. The hunt had begun, and the Rook would not rest until the unknown ship and the secrets it carried were his. The Solus Prime lay concealed within the swirling mists of a colossal gas giant, its presence masked by the planet's turbulent atmosphere. The ship seemed almost to breathe with the rhythm of the storm, its hull vibrating gently with a distant rumble of thunderous winds. Inside, the crew worked with quiet determination, their faces etched with fatigue but driven by the urgency of their task. The jump drive, their key to escape, lay in pieces, and every hand was needed to bring it back to life. Captain Kane stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the holographic star maps spread before him. These maps, stolen from the Empire's unsecured networks during their daring escape, revealed the vast expanse of the Zorathian Empire, a sprawling dominion of thousands of systems, each one a testament to the Empire's iron grip on the galaxy. "This Empire spans thousands of systems," Kane murmured, his voice thoughtful yet tinged with unease. The enormity of their situation weighed heavily on him, a reminder of the formidable forces arrayed against them. "And they don't take kindly to outsiders." His words hung in the air, a stark truth that everyone aboard the Solus Prime understood. They were alone, fugitives in a hostile galaxy, their survival dependent on the fragile hope of escape. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, there was a flicker of possibility, a chance to turn the tide. "Captain," Nolan Reyes interrupted, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the ship's systems. "I've intercepted communications about a planet called Zeratis. They are rebelling against the Empire." Kane's mind raced at the revelation, a spark of hope igniting in his chest. Zeratis, a name that conjured visions of resistance, of defiance against the oppressive might of the Empire. If they could reach this planet, if they could find allies among its people, perhaps they could change the course of their fate. "Reyes, are those communications secure?" Kane asked, his tone urgent. The prospect of allies was tantalizing, but they had to be cautious. The Empire's reach was long, and any misstep could lead to disaster. Reyes nodded, his fingers moving swiftly over his console. "They are using encrypted channels, Captain. It seems the Empire hasn't cracked their codes yet." Kane felt a surge of determination, his resolve hardening. Then we need to make contact. If Zeratis is rebelling, they might welcome us. We could share what we know, help them in their fight. Around him, the crew exchanged glances, a mix of hope and apprehension. The thought of allies was a lifeline, a chance to stand against the darkness that threatened to engulf them. But it was also a risky gamble that could lead to salvation or ruin. As Kane pondered their next move, the gas giant's turbulent atmosphere continued to swirl around them, its storms a reminder of the chaos lurking beyond their fragile sanctuary. Yet, within the confines of the Solus Prime, there was a sense of purpose, a shared understanding that their journey was far from over. "Prepare to move," Kane ordered, his voice firm. "Once the jump drive is repaired, we set course for Zeratis. It's time to find out if we have allies among the stars." With renewed vigor, the crew turned back to their tasks, their spirits lifted by the promise of hope. As the ship lay hidden in the shadow of the gas giant, the Solus Prime became more than just a vessel. It became a symbol of resistance, a beacon in the vast, uncharted darkness of the universe. Zeratis was a world engulfed in agony. From orbit, the once thriving planet was a patchwork of glowing scars, its surface marred by the relentless assault of Imperial warships. Great plumes of smoke rose from the cities below, twisting into the darkened sky like the anguished cries of a dying civilization. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the distant echoes of destruction, explosions that rippled across the land, turning homes, temples, and monuments into lifeless rubble. The Solus Prime emerged from hyperspace into this scene of devastation, its crews stunned into silence as the scale of the carnage unfolded before their eyes. The Imperial fleet hovered above Zeratis like vultures circling a dying beast, their energy cannons raining fire onto the planet's surface with cold, mechanical precision. Ward stood at the viewport, his expression grim, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't war," he said, his words heavy with disbelief and quiet fury. "It's extermination." Kane stood beside him, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His jaw tightened, the weight of what he was witnessing pressing heavily on his chest. The screams of those below, though unheard, seemed to echo in his mind, each one a dagger to his conscience. "This is what the Empire does," Kane said, his voice low but seething with anger. "They don't conquer. They annihilate." He turned sharply, his eyes blazing with determination. "Battle stations. We're not letting this stand." The crews sprang into action, their movements swift and purposeful. The tension in the air was electric, each person driven by a shared sense of duty and outrage. The Solus Prime surged forward, cutting through the void like a predator stalking its prey. Its sleek, angular design seemed to shimmer against the backdrop of the burning planet, a lone spark of defiance in a galaxy ruled by fear. As they closed in on the Imperial fleet, Kane's voice rang out, steady and commanding. "Target their systems. Disable their weapons, their engines, their shields. We're not here to kill, we're here to stop this slaughter." The Solus Prime roared into action, its advanced weaponry firing with surgical precision. Beams of energy lanced out, striking the Imperial warships with pinpoint accuracy. One by one, the enemy ships faltered, their weapons falling silent, their engines sputtering to a halt. The Solus Prime danced through the chaos, its movements graceful yet deliberate, each strike calculated to neutralize without destroying. On the bridge of the Imperial flagship, Commander Jorth watched the unfolding battle with growing disbelief. His sharp, angular features twisted in confusion as he observed the Solus Prime's unorthodox tactics. "They're disabling us without killing," he muttered, his voice tinged with both frustration and curiosity. He turned to his second-in-command, his crimson eyes narrowing. "What kind of strategy is this?" The officer hesitated, his expression uncertain. "It's Unconventional, sir. They are targeting our systems, not our lives. Jortha's mind raced, his thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and irritation. This was not how battles were fought. The Empire's way was one of overwhelming force, of crushing opposition with ruthless efficiency. But this ship, this Solus Prime, was different. Its crew fought with precision, with purpose, as if every move was part of some greater plan. Fools, Jorth hissed, though his voice betrayed a flicker of doubt. Mercy has no place in war. They'll regret this weakness. But as the Solus Prime continued its assault, disabling ship after ship without a single fatality, a strange unease began to settle over the Imperial fleet. The crew of the flagship exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence shaken by the mysterious vessel that defied both their tactics and their expectations. Back aboard the Solus Prime, Kane's focus never wavered. His commands were sharp, his resolve unbreakable. As the last of the Imperial warships fell silent, the battle shifted. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the skies above Zeratis grew quiet, the relentless bombardment ceasing as the Empire's fleet was rendered powerless. Kane exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the burning planet below. The damage was done, the scars of the Empire's cruelty etched deep into the world's surface. But amidst the destruction, there was a glimmer of hope. They had stopped the slaughter. They had made a stand. Reyes, Kane said, his voice steady but weighted with emotion. Open a channel to Zeratis. Let them know they are not alone. As the crew worked to establish contact, the Solus Prime hovered above the scarred planet, a silent guardian in the void. For the people of Zeratis, it was a beacon of hope, a promise that even in the darkest of times, there were those who would fight for what was right. And for the Empire, it was a warning. The Solus Prime was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of resistance, a defiance that could not be silenced. And its fight was far from over. The Imperial capital world, a jewel of power and ambition, shimmered beneath an eternal twilight. Its skies were painted in hues of deep crimson and violet, streaked with silver clouds that seemed to coil like restless serpents. Towers of obsidian and crystal pierced the heavens, their sharp edges glowing faintly with the energy of the Empire's might. The air hummed with a quiet tension, as if the planet itself anticipated the storm brewing within its heart. In the grand chamber of governance, a room vast enough to swallow entire cities, Emperor Zorth Malvex sat upon his throne, a monolithic seat carved from black stone, adorned with veins of gold that pulsed faintly like living veins. His presence was magnetic, his silhouette sharp against the shifting light of the chamber's high domed ceiling. The Emperor's golden eyes gleamed with an otherworldly brilliance, their depths unreadable, as if they held secrets too vast for mortal comprehension. Around him, his council gathered, their voices rising and falling in heated debate. The air was thick with tension, their words sharp as daggers, cutting through the silence that lingered between arguments. Admiral Lurk, a towering figure clad in dark armor, stepped forward. His face was a mask of determination, his voice a low growl that carried the weight of countless battles. "These humans are a threat," Lurk declared, his words heavy with disdain. "They've humiliated our fleet, undermined our authority. If we don't act swiftly, their defiance will spread like wildfire. We must crush them before they inspire rebellion across the galaxy." The chamber fell silent, the council waiting for the Emperor's response. Lurk's words hung in the air, their urgency undeniable, yet their brutality stark and unyielding. The Emperor's gaze remained steady, fixed on the swirling holographic map of the galaxy before him. The image of Earth and its defiant allies shimmered in the air, surrounded by the vast expanse of Imperial territory. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with deliberate grace, he rose from his throne. His movements were slow, calculated, each step echoing through the chamber like the tolling of a bell. The council watched him with bated breath, their eyes flickering with uncertainty and curiosity. "No," the Emperor said finally, his voice smooth and commanding, cutting through the tension like a blade. "We will not crush them." The Rex stiffened, his expression darkening. "But, Your Majesty?" The Emperor raised a hand, silencing him with a gesture that brooked no argument. His golden eyes swept across the room, meeting each council member's gaze in turn. There was no anger in his expression, only a calm certainty that left no room for dissent. "I will meet them," he continued, his tone unwavering. "I want to see these humans for myself. To understand what drives them. Their defiance is intriguing." The council exchanged uneasy glances, whispers rippling through the room like the rustling of leaves in a storm. The Rex's jaw tightened, his frustration evident, but he dared not challenge the Emperor further. The decision had been made, and the weight of it hung heavy in the air. The Emperor's lips curved into a faint smile, one that held neither warmth nor malice, but something far more enigmatic. "Prepare the envoy," he said, his voice carrying the finality of a decree. "Let them know the Empire does not fear their strength. And let them know I am watching." As he returned to his throne, the chamber seemed to pulse with a new energy, the shadows deepening around him. The Emperor's golden eyes glowed brighter, reflecting not just curiosity, but a quiet, dangerous resolve. He had chosen to face the unknown, to confront the spark of rebellion that threatened his dominion. And in doing so, he had set the stage for a confrontation that would shape the fate of the galaxy. The neutral station floated in the void of space, a solitary beacon of unity amidst the endless darkness. Its structure was breathtaking, a vast, circular marvel suspended in the stars, its silver hull reflecting the faint glow of distant galaxies. The station's design was elegant yet imposing, as though it had been crafted by hands that understood both the fragility and the strength of diplomacy. Around it, the stars seemed to hold their breath, as if even the universe itself awaited the outcome of what was about to unfold within its walls. Inside, the chamber for negotiations was no less magnificent. The room was circular, its walls lined with panels of iridescent material that shimmered like liquid light, shifting colors with every movement. The ceiling arched high above, a dome of transparent crystal that revealed the endless expanse of space beyond. Stars glittered like scattered diamonds, a silent reminder of the vastness that surrounded them. In the center of the room stood a long, curved table of polished obsidian, its surface smooth as still water, reflecting the faces of those gathered around it. Captain Kane and Ambassador Lyra Hale entered the chamber with measured steps, their presence calm yet unyielding. Kane's sharp eyes scanned the room, his posture firm, exuding quiet strength. Beside him, Lyra Hale carried herself with a composed grace, her expression serene but resolute. Her every movement spoke of purpose, her gaze steady as if she bore the weight of humanity's hopes upon her shoulders. Together, they were a stark contrast to the grandeur around them, humble, yet unshakable. At the far end of the chamber, the Emperor awaited. Zorth Malvax sat in a chair that was neither throne nor seat of war, but something in between, a symbol of his authority, yet stripped of the overt intimidation he wielded in his empire. His golden eyes gleamed in the soft light of the room, their piercing gaze fixed on the two humans before him. He was a figure of quiet power, his presence filling the room with an almost tangible weight. Around him stood no guards, no advisors, only silence, as if he needed no one to enforce his will. The Emperor's voice broke the stillness, low and deliberate, each word carrying the weight of his authority. "What do you want?" Hale stepped forward, her voice calm but firm, her words chosen with care. "Peace," she said simply, her tone unwavering. "A galaxy where strength isn't the only measure of power." The Emperor's gaze lingered on her, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he said nothing, the silence stretching like a taut string. His golden eyes seemed to pierce through her, as though he were searching for the truth hidden beneath her words. The air between them was heavy, charged with the unspoken tension of two worlds colliding. Finally, he spoke, his tone thoughtful, almost curious. "Your technology is remarkable," he said, his voice carrying a note of reluctant admiration. "Perhaps the Empire has grown complacent." His words hung in the air, a subtle admission of weakness from a man who had ruled unchallenged for so long. Yet there was no shame in his tone, only a quiet acknowledgement of a truth he could no longer ignore. The humans before him represented something new, something he could not fully understand, a spark of defiance that had refused to be extinguished. For 3 days, the chamber became a battlefield of words and ideals. The negotiations were fierce, each side testing the other's resolve, their arguments clashing like swords in the quiet tension of the room. Hale's voice carried the hopes of Earth, her words weaving a vision of a future where cooperation could thrive over conquest. Kane's presence was a steady anchor, his silence a reminder of the strength that humanity could wield if forced to. The Emperor listened, his golden eyes never leaving them, his expression a mask of calm. Yet beneath that calm lay a mind that turned over every word, every gesture, weighing them against the vast history of his empire. He was a man who had seen countless worlds rise and fall, yet these humans, fragile, defiant, and unyielding, had managed to challenge the very foundation of his rule. At last, an agreement was reached, a fragile truce born from the fires of conflict and the hope of something greater. The Empire would recognize Earth's sovereignty, a monumental concession that sent ripples through the galaxy. In return, Earth would share its knowledge, offering the tools to reform a galaxy that had long been ruled by fear and strength alone. As the final words were spoken, the room seemed to exhale, the tension that had gripped it slowly fading. The Emperor rose from his seat, his golden eyes meeting Hale's one last time. There was no smile on his face, but there was something else, perhaps respect, or perhaps the faintest glimmer of hope. "You have given me much to consider," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that seemed to echo beyond the chamber. "Perhaps the galaxy is ready for something new." As the humans departed, the stars outside the station seemed to shine a little brighter, their light cutting through the darkness of space. The fragile peace they had forged was a beginning, a small step toward a future where strength was not the only currency of power. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: the galaxy would never be the same again.